I think we can start. So I will give the floor to Tita Corvenoja, from our law division, who will give us the opening statement.
Thank you very much, Ludo, and good afternoon to all. It's with a great pleasure that I welcome you all to this side event for the 6th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Minamata Convention, Mercury. So for long, as you know, the scientific evidence has been very clear that the drivers for the biodiversity and nature loss stem from outside the biodiversity sector across society and economy. And among the root causes for the failure to address the biodiversity loss has actually been the insufficient recognition of the interlinkages between the nature loss, climate change, and pollution. The importance of synergies was once again underscored by the 2024 Nexus assessment of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the IPES, which underscored that integrated policy approaches can generate cumulative and amplified progress across multiple global MEAs goals, while also fostering enabling conditions for future actions. And we all feel that it's now being increasingly recognized that the MEA implementation can benefit from integrated approaches at national, regional, and global scales, and that will reduce duplication, enhance coherence, and maximize impact, particularly in addressing the 3 planetary environmental crises. And while the overall ambition for cooperation between MEAs may be facilitated at the global or international level, like we are doing now, it is at the national level actually where the synergies are more tangibly realized. Implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as the Global Framework on Chemicals, provide excellent entry points for coherent and synergistic implementation of MEAs. This is because both frameworks emphasize that their implementation at the national level requires a whole of government and society approaches, which entails involvement of broad range of MEA focal points and other experts. In this regard, enhanced collaboration, cooperation, and synergies among the MEAs at the national level is the key and can contribute both to effective and efficient implementation of the 2 frameworks, as well as the MEAs across the thematic clusters. There are many entry points for collaborative work. We often refer to pollution has specifically been addressed in Target 7 of the GBF as the key driver of biodiversity loss. However, there are also many other targets of the GBF, for example, the Target 23 on gender, which is also highly relevant to chemicals and waste cluster. Since 2019, the Bern process has been a cornerstone of UNEP's efforts to foster collaboration over 16 MEAs. It has helped bridge thematic areas for stronger cooperation, biodiversity, desertification, chemicals and waste, and climate change by promoting dialogue, knowledge exchange, and joint action. This process has strengthened relationship and trust among MEA secretariats and stakeholders, while its outcomes have received increasingly recognition by MEA governing bodies and the UNEA sessions. The Bern process has inspired many capacity building activities in countries and regions, opening avenues for enhanced cooperation across national institutions and stakeholders in implementation of MEAs. UNEP has been supporting the countries in their efforts and organized over the past years a number of sub-regional capacity building workshops in partnership with the relevant MEA secretariats to facilitate the best practices and development of skills in coherent and synergistic implementation of MEAs. Much of this work has been focusing on biodiversity and pollution nexus, and I must say here that no one size fits all. So it's all very important to listen to each other and share their experiences, and then think from that, based on that, what would be the best for your particular constitution. In preparation for UNEA 7 to be held in December this year, UNEP, in collaboration with UNEP WCMC, is preparing an information document which will present a selection of case studies of good practices and tools and success stories demonstrating how synergies can lead to more effective MEA implementation at the national level. The information in this document is based on comprehensive mapping of initiatives implemented between 2014 and 2024, one of which you will hear more about in today's event. The document will be supporting the discussions on the standing agenda item on cooperation with MEAs at UNEA 7 and provide supplementary information to the Executive Director's report on how UNEP has been supporting Member States in the synergistic implementation of MEAs at the country level as the mandate given by us by UNEA 6 through the related resolutions. UNEP stands to continue ready to work hand in hand with all of you to turn an ambition into action. Advancing the implementation of the MEAs and both the Global Biodiversity Framework and the Global Framework on Chemicals through truly integrated whole of government and whole of society approaches. Together, we can build a healthier, more resilient planet for present and future generations. It just requires a bit more work and commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tita, for this interesting and encouraging opening notes to set up the context of this side event, online event, but also to reinforce the fact that there are the issues of biodiversity, climate change, and pollutions are interlinked, and therefore it is important for us to make sure that these connections are made to through the multilateral environment agreements that are regulating or that that attempt to address these issues. So today we will have a session with 5 panelists. And it's a bit of a continuation to the discussion we had at the BRS COP earlier this year, where we had a high-level segment with the head of some of the secretariats present at a discussion, trying to also put the emphasis on the need for better collaboration between the MEAs at the secretariat level, at the work that is promoted by the secretariat, but as Tita said, at the national level as well, with the focal points, etc. So the format of the event will follow a very similar approach. We will hear from the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention, the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention, the Secretariat of the Biodiversity Convention, and the biological diversity, sorry. And then we'll hear from 2 countries to tell us about their experience as well and their expectations. So I will not take much of your time. I think it would be more interesting for you to listen to these panelists, and which all have a 5-minute intervention. And then we will have a few minutes for question and answers. So as was mentioned at the beginning, you can either put your questions in the chat during the presentations, or we will give you the floor during the Q&A session after the panel. So I will immediately give the floor to Agustin Arte from the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ludovic, and thanks again for the invitation to attend this important pre-COP6 side event. My name is Agustin Hart. I work at the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Secretariats, and distinguished delegates, colleagues. It's an honor for me to participate on behalf of the whole Secretariat in this preparatory event. Next slide, please. The purpose of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBF, is defined in its section A and B. to catalyze, enable, and galvanize urgent and transformative action in order to achieve the three objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity, which are the conservation of biodiversity, the sustainable use of its components, and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. Achieving these 2030 targets will pave the way toward the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature, a vision that calls for an ambitious whole of society approach. And I would like to highlight here the role and key inputs from other relevant multilateral environmental agreements, such as the ones on chemicals and waste, such as BRS, and other international organizations and processes which will also contribute to this whole goals and vision. Next slide, please. As Tita has already explained, among the drivers of biodiversity loss, pollution, including from chemicals and waste, is widely recognized in scientific literature by governments and by everyone as one of the most pressing. Persistent organic pollutants, mercury, plastics, hazardous waste, all degrade ecosystems, harm species, and threaten the ecological balance on which humans' well-being depends. Effective chemicals and waste management is therefore not only a matter of environmental health, but a crucial foundation to protect biodiversity and building resilient ecosystems. Yet, due to its complexity of these interconnections, the benefits of sound chemicals and waste management for biodiversity are not always immediately visible. Next slide, please. Indeed, achieving the 2030 targets will require integrated and coordinated implementation across multilateral environmental agreements and policies and frameworks, particularly those within the chemicals and waste cluster, or family as we call it. Important progress has already been made in fostering collaboration between the biodiversity and chemicals and waste communities. Several recent initiatives supported by UNEP and partner secretariats have helped identify interlinkages between the GBF targets and the objectives of the respective MEAs within the chemicals and waste cluster. These include the joint study developed together with the Minamata Convention, presented in 2021, titled Interlinkages Between the Chemicals and Waste and the MEAs Agreements and Biodiversity, Key Insights. And as Tita was explaining, the outcomes of a very important process called the Bern process, which we had the last conference early this year, Bern 3 conference, last year, the Bern 3 conference, and you can access the report and outcomes and recommendations of that report as well. Next slide, please. Recognizing the need for further collaboration and cooperation among MEAs, the Conference of the Parties of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions in 2023 welcomed the adoption of the GBF and requested the Secretariat to prepare a report including recommendations on how the VRS conventions contribute to the implementation of the 2030 targets and 2050 goals of the GBS. Next slide, please. Following this request, the VRS Secretariat partnered with the Global Framework on Chemicals Secretariat and with collaboration, among others, with the CVD Secretariat, including other partners, we recently developed a report on the contributions of chemicals and waste international agreements and frameworks to the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This report was presented and welcomed both at our Conference of the Parties in 2025 and at the first meeting of the open-ended working group of the GBFC celebrated recently in Uruguay. To give a clear overview, the targets have been grouped in 6 thematic areas where chemicals and waste management can significantly contribute. First, mitigation of pollution, impacts on ecosystem and species, grouping targets 4, 6, 7, and 8. Second, sustainable production and consumption, grouping targets 10, 15, and 16. Next slide, please. Third, enhancing knowledge and capacity for informed decision-making, grouping targets 1, 14, 20, and 21. And next, management and conservation efforts, grouping targets 2, 3, 11, and 12. Finally, next slide, please. Groups on mainstreaming gender equality and social justice, target 22 and 23, and integrated financial approach, target 18 and 19. What I would like to show with this is that not only target 7 on pollution is directly or indirectly related to chemicals and waste management, but rather most or not even all of the GBF targets have somehow the need and urge necessity for chemicals and waste management as well. The analysis of this report demonstrates that the linkages between chemicals and waste management and biodiversity loss is direct, tangible, and extensive. Pollution from hazardous substances, waste mismanagement, and chemical releases permeate nearly all aspects of biodiversity decline, from terrestrial and marine ecosystem degradation to impacts on species, health, genetic diversity, and ecosystems. Only by working together across conventions, next slide please, across conventions, sectors, and levels of governance, can we achieve the transformative change envisioned by the GBF. Chemicals and waste management must no longer be seen as a parallel agenda, but as a core enabler of biodiversity conservation and restoration. Together, through science, policy, and cooperation, we can make living in harmony with nature not just a vision, but a reality. And I will leave you here access to our convention's website where you can download the report I was describing. Back to you, Ludo. Thank you very much again for the invitation.
Thank you, Agustin, and thanks a lot. I'm very happy that you went fast because I think you just underlined the interlinkages that I was talking about in a much more clear manner. And you also underlined the work that has been done in collaboration between secretariats, which is really what we should all strive for. I will now give the floor to the Minamata Secretariat. So on my list, I have Lara, but I think I see Richard switching on his camera. So I guess it's you talking, right? All right.
Yes.
So over to you, Richard Gutierrez from the Minamata Secretariat. I discovered that, yeah, you're not Laura for sure.
Well, thank you very much, Ludovic. Good day, good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Lara sends her apology. She's not able to join us today. So I'll be taking over her role and also providing you with as I hope, as clear and as brief as Agustina's had in terms of the linkages in the Minamata Convention. So next slide, please. By the way, I'm Richard Gutierrez. I'm the Program Management Officer for National Reporting, and I'm also the focal point for the Secretariat on Indigenous Peoples, Youth, and Observers. Thank you so much. And then the slide in front of you shows what the Minamata Convention is, our objective, the objective of the convention, as well as when it was adopted and the number of parties that we have currently. Just to focus that convention is to protect human health and the environment from the anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury and mercury compounds. Next slide, please. So the objective covers both health and also looking at not just human health, but the environment. So this slide in front of you quickly shows what the mercury health effects are with regards to humans. But inherent in this, as well as the objective I've explained, also covers the environment. And there's great impact and concern over mercury impact on wildlife as well. And I don't need to elaborate on that. But the key three things that, for those of you who are tuning in or just new to the issue, is the persistent and bioaccumulative and, of course, toxic nature of mercury and its ability to transcend territorial borders. Which makes it a great concern, especially for on biodiversity issues and not just for human health issues. Next slide, please. Now, building on what Tita has said, as well as Agustin, it's really very clear that a lot of these issues, especially with chemicals and its impact on biodiversity is not very clear. For instance, when you look at the Minamata Convention, you will note that, especially on the slide, in the middle part of the slide, we have control measures that's elaborated in the dark gray, the light gray, and the amber color. And most of you, this presentation will be shared with you all after the event, and then you can look at it at your leisure. But main point I wanted to make is that for many of the requirements of the Minamata Convention, these are on track. So issues on emissions and releases, for example, coming from certain mercury added products and processes, particularly in the phase out of mercury containing products and processes, is advancing, and we can say is reducing emissions and releases to the environment. But there is one key issue that is where synergies is essential and necessary. Next slide, please. And this is on the issue of artisanal and small-scale gold mining. A lot of this work has started in COP4, excuse me, the artisanal scale presents a really big issue because of the devastating impacts it has on human health and biodiversity. For example, mining is the fourth largest driver of deforestation, and it may already affect up to 1/3 of the world's forest ecosystems. Over 70% of direct mining related to deforestation at global level can be tracked to only two commodities. One is coal, and the other one is gold. So the significance of artisanal small-scale gold mining is that it produces 20% of gold on the global market. So at COP4, and Agustin also mentioned back in 2021, there was a review or report on interlinkages, and that this was done with the BRS and the Minamata Convention, and the Minamata Convention has taken that work a little bit further because of this close linkage with mercury and biodiversity. And you will see that it's slide in front of you with this particular report, wherein we looked at the past experiences of parties on biological diversity in integrating mercury-related control measures in their national biodiversity strategic and action plans and national reports of the Minamata Conventions. So in short, we looked at what the NBSAP says and what our national action plans on ASGM are trying to, how parties are reporting. And interestingly enough, the analysis showed that 20% of parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity had already provided information related to mercury. And 16% have done so in their NBSAPs as well. Next slide, please. Here you will see sort of a collage of things that have been done at COP5, looking at, to the left, the COP at its fifth meeting, at its fifth conference, passed the decision 5.1 on the effects of mercury and pollution on indigenous peoples, looking at the need for broadening and participating of indigenous peoples in the projects and programs under the Minamata Convention. Decision 5.7 is on artisanal small-scale gold mining, looking at and pushing for greater collaboration with indigenous peoples and local communities. And then lastly, on to your right, you have PIP 5/17, I discussed already on the report, and looking at how to look at supportive ways to implement both conventions. Next slide, please. Now, the key thing coming in and building up on COP5 and previous work, we're coming in now at COP6, where in November, from November 3 to 7, the COP will decide on a couple of the three major items that I just presented to you. And the first major item that will be covered is on document 6/20, which is the roadmap for enhancing co-benefits from implementing the Minamata Convention and the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework. As you can see from the slide in front of you, it includes an overview of activities undertaken in response to Decision 5/17. And there are key pillars here: contribution to the monitoring network, monitoring framework, mercury reduction actions and targets, creation of an enabling environment, and indication for measuring progress. Next slide, please. Now, what would be curious, and this is where sort of all these interlinkages comes together in a very clear way, is on INF 27, which is a technical document on integrating action to reduce mercury pollution from ASGM into national and to NBSAPs. So this work was funded by the government of Netherlands, and we're very glad that this work has been able to put forward, because in essence, if you go to the next slide, it creates a crosswalk of, next slide, please. You will see from the next slide, this is a sample of the table contained in INF 27, where the Secretariat was able to create a crosswalk of the NBSAP's target 1, for example, as you will see on the left, the elements that are found in the National Action Plan in Annex C of the Convention, which is in the middle, And then to the right, you will see the sample actions that parties can take to contribute to achieving Target 7 and meeting their NAP elements. So this is a wide-ranging table that can be found in Inf 27, which concretely shows where the crosswalk is, where the intersection and synergies align. And also, I think what's more important is it provides concrete actions and concrete examples for parties to see what they're already reporting and what they're actually doing, which merges these two, both the NBSAPs and the national action plans together. Next slide, please. And I believe this is my last slide. For COP6 coming in, we're looking at as well furthering the work to help strengthen the engagement of Indigenous peoples. The COP has recognized that the role that the Indigenous peoples play in addressing both mercury pollution and biodiversity loss. It also acknowledges the role of Indigenous people, not just as victims, but also as key contributors in addressing the triple planetary crisis and their role in their specific and unique role as populations in vulnerable situations to take action to the issue confronting them, especially on Mercury. So 6/11, just very quickly, we're going to be introducing an effective engagement of participation of Indigenous peoples in the development of national action plans. In fact, there's an addendum 1 to that. We are putting forward, the Secretariat is putting forward a possible review of the implementation of Article 7, which was developed together with the Global Mercury Partnership and the AES-GM leadership to put that document together. And then document 6/17 on strengthening the effective engagement of Indigenous peoples as well as local communities. We present a summary report on the needs and priorities of Indigenous peoples. And I think that's going to be very interesting for you as well, for those of you who are listening and are keen on this particular issue. And then lastly, we have efforts to improve the Indigenous peoples platform to get information and share and exchange information coming from Indigenous communities on work they're doing to improve not just mercury pollution, but also addressing looking at together their work on biodiversity and mercury. And I believe that's the next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. And back to you, Ludovic. I'll be on hand for any questions later.
Thank you, Richard. Again, some very rich information here on the work from the Minamata Convention's point of view. I see a hand by Tita, the person who opened the meeting. So Tita, do you want to intervene now, or do you prefer waiting for the Q&A session? Okay, well, I'm not sure then, because Tita doesn't seem to be either you muted or there's an issue. So we will continue then with the panel. I was informed by the CBD will not be intervening this afternoon. So we will jump directly to the two countries examples that we have. And I will start with calling on Mr. Motu Kaneko from the permanent mission of Japan to the UN in Geneva. Japan is a key supporter of this work, so it's important to mention that. And also, as Japan is also submitted some proposition to reinforce the work on synergies, and we would like to then hear from you, please. Over to you.
So thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. My name is Moto Kaneko from Japan Mission in Geneva. So as we are all aware, the three planetary environmental crises pose significant challenges to humanity and threaten the comprehensive achievement of global agendas, agreements, and frameworks such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement, Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the Global Framework on Chemicals. Since these planetary crises are interdependent, a synergistic approach is required to tackle these challenges effectively and simultaneously. Such an approach leverages the interlinkages of these issues and enhances the overall impact of interventions. So today I would like to present Japan's international efforts in this area and how these efforts are reflected in domestic implementation. Let me begin with the international aspect. At UNEA 6 last year, Japan proposed a draft resolution to promote synergies, which was later adopted as UNEA Resolution 6/4. This resolution includes encouragement for member states and requests for the UNEP Secretariat. For member states, this resolution encourages the promotion of synergies when implementing multilateral environmental agreements, MEAs, to contribute to the SDGs. It also encourages them to enhance their understanding of synergies through information exchange. For the UNEP Secretariat's activities based on this resolution, Japan has been providing financial support to them. The Secretariat is collecting and synthesizing best practices for promoting synergies among MEAs and is implementing capacity development for developing countries. A summary of these activities will be presented at UNEA 7 this December. For the upcoming UNEA 7, Japan submitted a draft resolution to follow up on Resolution 6/4. The new draft resolution aims to reaffirm the importance of synergies agreed upon at UNEA 6. It also encourages member states to accelerate synergistic actions and projects that are tangible and on the ground. Japan hopes this draft resolution will be adopted through the discussion among member states. Now I move on to the domestic implementation. Based on the UNEA resolutions, including the draft one we submitted, Japan is also promoting concrete initiatives. One example relating to the theme of today's event is the launch of an expert group this year under the project Advancing Nature Positive Through Chemical Management. There are cross-cutting issues and existing policy gaps across chemicals management and biodiversity conservation. This expert group aims to identify such issues and gaps. A range of related issues have been already identified and are being examined. Here are examples. Chemical contamination problems like PFAS in endangered species. Challenges from increased biocide use in urban areas. Needs for advancing ecological toxicity assessment. Collaborative efforts within civil society for chemical management and biodiversity conservation. And indicators to evaluate chemical pollution impacts on biodiversity. The expert group continues its work to formulate an action plan to be implemented in the coming years, considering consistency with international goals. So today I have experienced a couple of Japanese experience from both international and domestic perspectives. We believe it is useful for us to share good examples and lessons learned from each other through opportunities like this event. And by doing so, each country will be able to implement integrated action in line with its own circumstances. We hope that such actions will be promoted in each country and that this will contribute to synergistic progress on the GBF, the GFC, and other agendas, agreements, and frameworks. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Kaneko, for your intervention. It's really important for us to have, of course, the leadership and support of Japan in this endeavor. So thanks a lot. We will get the perspective of another national perspective from our last panelist for the day, Mr. Patrick Umuhoza from Rwanda and the Environmental Management Authority of Rwanda. So please go ahead, Mr. Umuhoza.
Thank you so much. I am very happy to be with you today, discussing with the national experience and as well learn from others on how we can just improve vis-a-vis the synergetic implementation and have the or acquire this kind of, profit the country can gain from this process. So next step, please. So mechanism for Rwanda started this journey in 2000, if I may say, 2003, where the Rwanda Environment Management Authority was established, and it was even given a mandate to monitor the implementation of all environmental agreements that Rwanda ratified. So all MEAs are normally in different institutions, depending on their scope and areas of focus. But we are having a department in Rwanda Environment Management Authority that was established in 2012 to just monitor the implementation of all these MEAs. So now to make sure that the joint planning as well as the synergy implementation among biodiversity chemicals conventions and some other conventions, including climate change conventions, we normally have, so far we've already conducted around 23 coordination meeting with the National Focal Point meeting. And this platform was established in 2012, where the National Focal Point meeting of all MEAs are supposed to come together at each or at the beginning of each fiscal year to assess the implementation of the previous year, as well as conduct a joint planning. This kind of joint planning, what helps us normally, we know that we are having some conventions with some financial opportunities, have some other conventions with no financial opportunities, but we also know that we can't say that we are just executing. If we are talking about addressing chemicals, we know that we are addressing chemicals to just safeguard human health and biodiversity as well. So having this kind of joint planning to address chemicals and protect biodiversity has played a significant role, and it also helped us to avoid, if I may say, a kind of deprecation and make sure that the planned activities under the MEA is also well designed to just respond to some other biodiversity and climate change related MEAs. So this also the first meeting conducted at each fiscal year, it normally helps us to set what we are going to carry out along the entire fiscal year. And then that department established in 2010, its duty is normally to just follow up. How far are you in terms of implementing the planned activities? And then at the end of the year, that's when that unity with the staff dedicated, who is me, to just make sure that the implementation of all MEAs are within objectives or in the national planned activities. Then we just come together at the end of the fiscal year also to evaluate how far we are. And then by the end, we also just share challenges we are coming across with to make sure that for the next year, we'll be having a joint planning that is responding to the challenges we experienced. Then after having this kind of joint planning and assessment of the planned activities, we also used to have an, if I may say, it is called a national MEAs national implementation status report for Rwanda. So this report normally reflects the national image in terms of implementing the MEAs, how far we are in terms of executing the MEAs, and in terms of implementing the synergy among the MEAs. So we just compile all and then have it to reflect to what normally how far and what Rwanda has done in terms of achieving the goals of the synergies of the MEAs at each end of the year. So far, we've already produced around 22 reports. So another one will be produced by the end of this fiscal year. We've already started in July of this year. Then concerning to the normally next slide, please. Now concerning to the ongoing effort, we normally we are having 5 wetlands which are under rehabilitation. Here, someone may ask how comes the wetlands are coming under this presentation. So we used to have, there was some wetlands that were heavily polluted by the industries. So the government decided to just relocate all those industries that were polluting the biodiversity, as well as hamper the ecological function of the wetlands. And then the government decided to relocate them and created industrial zone so far, where each district in Rwanda has an industrial zone to just help us to monitor their the waste generation, if they if we are achieving the sustainable production under each and every industrial zone. So one example that I can give is, so before taking that decision, normally it was a recommendation made by one of the steering committee, where we carried out under which normally steering committee was established to monitor the implementation of MEAs, which also just meet twice in a year. And then this steering committee is the one that is there to assess whether the projects under the MEAs or the national plans being, made are also just reflecting to the objectives of the MEAs. So then the recommendation received, Rwanda Environment Management Authority carried out a testing in one of the wetland, pilot wetland, and then we observed, if I may say, a high pollution of that wetland. And then within it, we just compiled and prepared a cabinet note that ended up to the decision of, restoring those wetlands and ensure that they are protected under, they are free from chemicals that were just coming from different industries. So far, the industrial zones established, each industrial zone has a control, if I may say, it's a central sewage system that is helping us to just monitor that before any kind of release, they are just meet an environmental sound manner. All of this being conducted is to make sure that the rehabilitated wetlands are also under meeting the targets under GBF, and also they're helping us to make sure that at least the restored wetlands are just becoming a habitat or ecosystem to different biodiversity that is sometimes, due to the high populations being, lost their ecosystem of where they can stay. And then this is also in line of achieving the global biodiversity target 2, and we are just doing this integration to also make sure that we are meeting with the GBF target 7. So now, recently, Rwanda has also launched NBSOP, where we also now under carrying out biodiversity standards, which is also going to help us to make sure that biodiversity is also free from the harm caused by the chemicals. We are also, if I may say, under in partnership with the UNEP, we are also normally carrying out a national inventory on lead contamination. You know, after just seeing that different wetland are being just harmed by the chemicals or heavy metals, we've decided that let's now have a national overview, and as well as spot where we just see a high concentration of pollution in different areas, so that we can just also include among the planning and address all those challenges vis-a-vis pollution and biodiversity challenges. So this is the summary of implementation of MEAs. It is helping us, you know, when one also can serve as an opportunity, especially for the developing countries, where one funding opportunity can also help us to achieve more than expected. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the example you've provided. It's clear to us that, you know, we understand and we've heard that from previous speakers that the focal points of these different conventions often sit in different offices in government, and therefore communication and exchange is not always natural, and it requires vision and intention from the government to make sure that we are working together and that there's good connections between the focal points. And as you have, you've rightly put in your example, when it's done, then other part of the economy take into account all the requirements of the conventions, and therefore the country advance in the implementation in a much more efficient way. So thanks a lot. That was a very good example. So we hear a bit late, but even though we had one speaker less, it's now the Q&A session. So I am not sure if people have their hand up, but you will be given the floor if you want to speak. We'll also, and it's great to see that we have a number where we have 27 participants, and that number stayed stable during the whole event. So thank you for that. Shariful, I don't see the questions. If people have put questions in the chat, so help me there, but I don't see any hands up either among the participants.
Hi, Ludo. Just to confirm that we don't see any question or comment on the chat panel, neither we have a raised hand on the participants panel. I can see that Richard has raised his hand, so perhaps.
Yep. Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, Ludo. I just wanted to take advantage. Maybe some of the participants want to further warm up, but I just wanted to circle back on and sort of reflect on what's been presented and discussed, or at least discussed by the panelists. So I just wanted to raise two big points here. For instance, the key point on, we've had a lot of discussions on incorporating targets and actions on chemicals and waste into NBSAPs and reflecting these in the national action plans. I think it's also critical to also understand why this integration is important from a very practical perspective, and that it is, at least for the Minamata Convention, we look at it also from the possibility of including funding for integrated projects under the GEF. Under the Minamata Convention, the GEF is one of our financial mechanisms. And the GEF is also, as I understand, is trying to pursue an integration in projects to motivate coherence at the national level. So having these concrete actions integrated in the national action plans do sort of have an impact on funding and availability of funding for through the GEF, or at least in terms of when it's vision and realizing integration across programs that integrates biodiversity, chemicals, and human health. So that's one point. The other point I'd like to make, as well as reflecting on the discussions we've had, is that we have all of these disparate national action plans or national actions going. And I'm sort of reflective on it in terms of where the Minamata Convention is. One of the big things coming up at COP6 is on the effectiveness evaluation. And for all of these disparate actions on these integrations and synergies, looking at effectiveness evaluation, one way perhaps of doing this is looking at how do we make sure that all of this is monitored in a framework that can help understand how it's all playing together. And I think, in reality, we need this connection to be made at the level of the CPD. This is our thinking, and that in order to raise expectations and motivate integrated approach further at the national and in many countries. And then the last point I wanted to make is related to the point I made in terms of point of indigenous peoples and local communities and other stakeholders. So as MEAs are trying to integrate action, we should also recognize, excuse me, we should also recognize possibilities of synergies in engaging civil society, indigenous peoples, local communities, youth, women, in all of these actions as well. So this is part of the reason we're looking at an effective engagement of indigenous peoples in the national action plans. So if indigenous peoples representatives are engaged not only at the development, but implementation and review of national action plans on EAs and GM, and if we have good integrations with NBSAPs, we can have the synergistic approach, not only in the actions, but also in the engagement of civil society towards solutions that we're all, commonly that we're all facing. So thank you very much. Sorry for the long intervention there. Back to you.
Thanks, Richard. Very good points you made, and I hope everyone agrees. We have one hand actually up, so I would like to give the floor to Carmen Capriles. If you could introduce yourself and make your intervention.
Hello, good morning. Well, it's morning here. My name is Carmen Capriles. I am from Bolivia, also from the women major group for UNEP, UNEA. And well, in Bolivia, we have done like the studies about the contamination with mercury, about indigenous, in indigenous populations. And mostly we have worked with women. So we know that the levels are really, really high, and that the contamination, it's because the first source of are fish. So we know that most of the fish of the basin, we're talking about the Amazonic basin, are contaminated. And it's not only Bolivia. We have results from Brazil, we have results from Peru, that one of the biggest basins in the planet are contaminated. There are studies on alligators that are contaminated with mercury. So it is nice to talk about bioremediation, remediation and bioremediation, but how do you do it when you have such a large contamination site and that in many cases is unaccessible? Why are we not working in prevention? Because this is not a pond or a lake that is contaminated that we can close and we can put some algae or something that will eventually kind of like be remedied. We're talking about one of the most important, like even tipping points for a hotspot of biodiversity and a tipping point for climate change that is highly contaminated with mercury. So I would like to see that what further than like the political commitment of we can do on site, and why are we not focusing on preventing this from happening? Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, for this challenging question. I think that's also a fair reflection of how we can improve this collaboration. Okay, I don't know if any one of the panelists want to answer to Carmen. We will have to close the event very soon. So if not, I see Tessia has a hand up. I will give you the floor as the last question. Could you introduce yourself too, please?
Yes, good day. My name is Tisha Javasis. I work at the CARICOM Secretariat. I just want to say thank you very much. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and just hearing from the country examples from Japan and Rwanda. And I think the colleague from the Minamata Secretariat and also the previous person who spoke kind of alluded to what my thoughts were in terms of how can we upgrade the concerns and the need for the cross-cutting issues surrounding the different conventions, especially chemicals, to the political level, and to just some thoughts probably from Rwanda and Japan and how that is being done in terms of raising the concern and ensuring that the focus is not only on, for example, climate change, but ensuring that the effects of chemicals and waste management, it cross-cuts, as we've been talking about so far. So I just wanted to say that, and to possibly have a very brief discussion from our countries, how that is being incorporated, particularly in the Rwanda example of the committees that are in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for this important point as well. Any quick feedback from any of the panelists on Tisha's point? Oh, Hadi, maybe, since you put your camera up. If not, then we've reached the end of the event, and I will now give the floor to Ms. Kay Williams, the head of the Secretariat for the Global Framework on Chemicals. I think the GFC was mentioned in a few of the interventions. There's work that is going in conjunction with your Secretariat, so it's only fair that to hear from you as well, Kay.
Thank you very much, Ludo. Thank you, participants online, and thank you to the panelists that have contributed today. So just as a brief reminder for those that may not be familiar with the Global Framework on Chemicals, it was a new framework that was adopted in 2023, and it is a voluntary multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral framework that has 5 strategic objectives and 28 targets. And as Augustine from BRS was...
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good.
I can.
You know, as Augustine has indicated, we have a number of targets, and those targets are absolutely relevant when they're delivery to the targets that the Global Biodiversity Framework is also having to deliver. And I think that where our framework comes in, it does provide that platform at the international level. We heard Patrick talking about the national level and having integrated platforms. At the international level, the framework does have actors from not only the different chemicals and waste conventions, but we have actors from the International Labour Conventions, the World Health Organization, and climate change conventions. So it is that opportunity to talk about chemicals in its wider sense. We also are encouraging many more businesses and financial actors to come on board, because it's through them that we'll be able to transform the supply chains and make sure that we are dealing with prevention, which is what was mentioned by a speaker just earlier. So I would also like to say that in terms of what Muto from Japan was saying about their expert group advancing nature through chemical management, it's really key that we start looking at where we're measuring. And I would say that looking at indicators to evaluate our chemical pollution especially through where there are indicators in common, we can achieve co-benefits, because monitoring and evaluation is often very expensive, and we can therefore report to a number of our conventions through using and being smart about the indicators that we choose to develop. And I'm building on Patrick's comment about his platform. I think working at the national level through our focal points is absolutely key. And we're developing at the moment with the global framework an induction program and training support for our focal points that will allow us not only to make sure that those engaged with the global framework understand the responsibilities and have the capacity and abilities to do the work on the ground, but also they can integrate and synergize with all the other conventions moving forward. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll pass back to Ludo.
Thank you, Kay, and thank you also for being in time. And that means that we can now close the event. So thanks a lot to the panelists, the participants, from our colleagues from the Law Division for putting this event together, and the support that we have received from the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention in Shariful Islam. So we will hopefully see a lot of you during the various events this week and at the COP in a few days and a few weeks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for making time. Thank you, Shariful. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.